Our research studio thesis begins with the presupposition of two important beliefs. First, climate mitigation will not do enough to counteract the effects of climate change. Carbon emissions will not be sufficiently limited, and global warming will increase temperatures across North and Central America. Second, individuals will need to migrate to higher latitudes, traveling north from Central America to the US and from the US to Canada. We locate our community resettlements within a revised version of NAFTA that re-regulates existing economic models and subsequently triggers an expansion of mobility that extends beyond goods and services to include individuals.
Our mobile aggregates function as a post-urban nomadism within this new economic model, allowing for residents to migrate, upsize, and downsize as needed. Housing assets are no longer tied to land, but rather are invested in a system of post-climate urban living. The system is self-sustainable across a variety of environments, water scarcities, and site limitations. Site-specific breezeway enclosures allow for varying degrees of public-private thresholds to be produced, recalling the American vernacular dog trot typology. Roof envelopes give residents the agency to customize their unit's breezeways.
The module builds itself off a chassis that becomes the infrastructural and spatial spine of the unit, housing MEP, HVAC, and a water cistern. The unit massing is constructed with the focus on the positioning of figuratively assertive outdoor spaces. The chassis becomes the anchor from which expansion may occur. The sectional shift along the roofline of the chassis allows for light to be brought into the periphery zones along the spine. Private moments of exteriority bleed inside through the intersection of the breezeway and spine of the module, expanding the traditional delineation between the domestic unit and its yard. The ease of construction needed to deploy the modules allows for the gaps of urbanism to become the staging area for construction, with those same areas later remaining open as the communal zones across our sites.
We believe that climate refugees will seek out cities connected by existing transportation routes that offer development infrastructure and socioeconomic opportunity. Three dichotomous sites situated in Mexico, the US, and Canada function as testbeds for the deployment of resettlement communities, each of which produces substantially different spatial and social configurations. In Uman, an exurb outside of Merida, Mexico, our aim is smaller community settlements of around 12 units in repeatable blocks. Blocks in Uman are built up at its periphery, with the central zone remaining underutilized and often inaccessible to the broader community. The project's urban effects are supported by visual connections through modules and their breezeways. Visual bisections through the spine produce private domain and public benefit concurrently. The multi-axial nature of our module allows for positioning to adjust to the existing context, aligning and snapping to adjacent urban thresholds in a superimposed block. In order to sponsor economic opportunity for these NAFTA migrants, we speculate on the conditioning of open zones magnified by the modules to become an asset to the communities.
California City, an exurb outside of Los Angeles, has the potential for the largest agglomeration of units through infill urbanism. Different scales of community zones are produced, including large community parks, parkettes, and shared courts among units. Aggregations here depend on line of sight to break down the superblock, allowing for porosity and perforation through an otherwise dense urban condition. Urban and community planning strategies are used to produce axial ties between industry and housing that remain separate urbanistically. In contrast to the orthogonally aligned existing residential homes, the module set's diagonality allows for visual as well as physical slips into and through neighborhood blocks, producing a sense of parallax.
The site in British Columbia is imagined to be a series of repeated clusters in low-density towns like North Bend. The centripetal organization strategy here sponsors a figure-ground relationship of the site that deviates from normative housing strategies and instead places emphasis on access to community zones. Lines of sight, originating off of the main axes, permeate deep through layers of units and pocket communal zones embedded within the grid. An axial tie is established from a community node that hinges from the river across housing arrays to the existing train station and its related economies. This gives us the opportunity to create a more expansive and interconnected system with pocket communities that retain equal access across public, semi-public, and private zones.
Structured and visible lines of sight become the spatial organization strategy that modules are deployed with across all three sites. Visibility through the spine is coalesced with figural zones between units, thus operating as a mode of fractal expansion. Through the use of exterior pattern and color application, a more contingent relationship is made between the units and the ground plane. The angled orientation of units places emphasis on interstitial zones between them, left decidedly open and receptive to spontaneous forms of public life. Units' axial alignment along the breezeway ensures permeability between the existing community, and proposed units. Units qualitatively encode visual continuity across spatial collectives, extending beyond norms of prototypical housing typologies.